2016 presidential elections closely approaching, and with two candidates who have the highest unapproval ratings of any other two candidates in American history, I believe that many Americans are beginning to wonder, when did America become so partisan? Some people claim that we were always this partisan, and it's only simply due to the fact that we have the 24-hour news cycle and the internet that we've simply just become more aware of how partisan we are. However, Mann and Ornstein claim that it is even worse than it looks. In their republished book from 2012 for the 2016 elections in 2016, they claim that there is something deeply troubling about American partisanship today that is truly unique. The authors point out that the use of the debt ceiling in 2011 and in 2013 as a political bargaining chip would have been unheard of 20 or 30 years ago. However, this highlights the fact that there is something truly uniquely bad about the partisanship today than it has been in the past. Now, people might be wondering, when did America become so partisan? And actually, the authors point to the specific date of 1994. The significance of this date is the first time the Republican Party took back Congress in over 40 years. But to understand the significance of that date, we have to go all the way back to 1978. You see, in 1978, the authors had a tradition of interviewing incoming freshman congressmen on what their views and political ideals were. That's when they interviewed an incoming freshman congressman from the state of Georgia named Newt Gingrich, who actually told them his ideas for how the Republican Party can take back Congress from the Democrats. His plan more or less went like this: everyone hates Congress, but no one hates their congressmen, which makes it very difficult for the political party to change in Congress because people keep voting for the same person over and over again. However, his strategy was that if you can make Congress look as corrupt, ineffective, and incompetent as possible, you can actually convince the American people that the only way to get Congress to work again is to throw out the incumbent political party and replace everyone. While moderate Republicans at the time felt very uncomfortable with Newt Gingrich's plan, he did have some political allies in the Republican Party, including a freshman congressman from the state of Wyoming by the name of Dick Cheney. Yeah, this just keeps getting better. And once he gained more and more political allies, he was able to increase partisanship in Congress by blocking bills that Democrats wanted to be passed, and by making Congress look as ineffective as possible. As a matter of fact, Newt Gingrich encouraged confrontation regularly. In a speech he gave to his fellow conservatives, he actually said this: "The number one fact about the news media is they love fights. For months," he explained, he had been giving organized, systematic, researched one-hour lectures. Did CBS rush in and ask if they could tape one of my one-hour lectures? No. You have to give them confrontations. When you give them confrontations, you get attention. When you get attention, you can educate." Now, if that's not some Frank Underwood, House of Cards shit, I do not know what is. And in 1994, Newt Gingrich was able to capitalize on his strategy, and the Republican Party was able to win back Congress for the first time in 40 years. However, it set a very dangerous precedent, that if the government is functioning well, it is ultimately bad for politics. The authors of the book are not the only ones that say that 1994 represented a turning point in partisanship in America. Robert Reich, who was the Secretary of Labor for the Clinton administration, also had this to say.
Newt Gingrich came to town as speaker, and he brought with him people who really represented a different culture. I remember going up to some committee, there was an oversight committee of the Labor Department in February of 1995. I'm sorry, this is after Gingrich came in. February 1995, and I was testifying, and one member of Congress stopped me and said, "Mr. Secretary, I have a question to ask you." I said, "Yes." He said, "Are you a communist?" Now, I thought it was a joke. This was a new member of Congress, and I really, and I turned to my staff, I said, "He's joking, right?" And my staff member said, "No."
The book then goes into other things that are making us more partisan, such as the internet or the media, but I personally won't go into that in this video because you've already heard that a million times probably by now. The book also talks about problems associated with filibustering and how they allow it for a minority in Congress to essentially obstruct legislation for a majority, thus causing more and more polarization and partisanship. The book points out while the Democratic Party is no stranger to partisanship, such as when they blocked judicial nominees from the Bush administration, the book points out that the Republican Party has ultimately been way more partisan and ideological than their Democratic counterparts. Now, the reason we need to highlight this is that too often in the media we try to blame partisanship on both parties, but in truth it is actually asymmetrical. The GOP party is actually much more partisan than the Democratic Party. Now, the book gives a list of solutions for how we can solve partisanship in America, and of all the solutions I liked the ones that increased voter turnout. Now, the reason that increasing voter turnout can decrease partisanship is because ultimately right now in America, only the most ideological people go out and vote. However, if we increase voter turnout to more moderate individuals, then we can decrease partisanship. Some of the ways that we can increase voter turnout would be to make it mandatory to vote. So if you don't vote, you get fined $15, which is what they do in Australia right now. And voter turnout is sometimes over 90%. Now, there were some things I really didn't like about this book. Some of the policy solutions that they talk about are very technical in nature, and it was a little bit challenging to understand what they were talking about. And some of the data that they put in this book is borderline incomprehensible. For instance, here is a graph that they put in their book to show that Republicans are more partisan than Democrats. This graph makes no sense to me. It has a y-axis that just says conservative and liberal with numbers from -0.8 to 0.8 with no units, no indication of what those numbers mean, and at no point do the authors actually clarify what the heck I'm looking at with this graph. Not to mention, this book was actually republished. It was originally published in 2012 and got republished to 2016 to cover some of the nuances of the presidential election. And at no point in this book does it mention Donald Trump as a presidential nominee. Are you kidding me? You republished a book in 2016 to discuss partisanship, and you don't even mention Donald Trump? With all that being said, I'm gonna give this book 3.5 stars out of 5. The book was very entertaining in the beginning, and it did provide very good information throughout. However, it became sort of muddled and confusing at points, so I can't give it the highest rating. Alright guys, that's my review, so stay tuned for more book reviews and updates on Ryan's Rants.